The impact rattled Navarra's bones as the scout vessel plummeted through the atmosphere. Warning lights bathed the cockpit in crimson as she fought with the controls, her emerald skin glistening with exertion. Beside her, the human lieutenant, James Harlow, braced against the console, his face tight with concentration rather than fear. "Stabilizers offline," he shouted over the alarms. "We're going down hard." Navarra's glowing blue eyes narrowed. "Secure yourself, human. This landing will not be gentle." The ship tore through thick violet clouds, spinning wildly before crashing into a sprawling jungle. Metal screeched against massive tree trunks, and the reinforced viewport finally cracked as they came to a violent stop. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of escaping coolant and the distant calls of alien wildlife. Navarra unstrapped herself with practiced efficiency, assessing her injuries, minor, nothing her advanced physiology couldn't handle. The human hadn't been so fortunate. Lieutenant Harlow hung limp in his restraints, a thin line of blood trailing from his temple. She hesitated. Protocol dictated minimal contact with other species, especially humans. Their delegation was meant to be strictly diplomatic, and she had been assigned as security detail, not as a caretaker for injured aliens. Yet they were stranded together, at least until the Istari High Command tracked their emergency beacon. With reluctant precision, she freed him from his restraints and eased him to the floor. His breathing was steady, his pulse strong beneath her fingertips. Navarra had studied human anatomy as part of her combat training, but touching one alive was different, warmer than expected, fragile yet resilient. James stirred, his eyes fluttering open. They were a deep brown, unlike any eye color on her homeworld of Istra. For a moment his gaze was unfocused, then he locked onto her face with startling clarity. "Are we dead?" he murmured, "because you look like a goddess." Navarra withdrew her hand as if burned. "We are very much alive, Lieutenant, and such comments are inappropriate." He winced, touching his head wound. "Just a concussion talking, sorry." He struggled to sit up. "Assessment." His quick shift to professionalism surprised her. "Ship is inoperable, navigation systems destroyed, life support functioning at minimal capacity, emergency beacon activated." James nodded, glancing around the shattered cockpit. Sunlight tinted amber and rose by the twin suns filtered through the cracked viewport. "Any idea where we are?" "Uncharted territory," Navarra replied, moving to salvage supplies. "The ion storm pushed us off course before communications failed." "Estimated rescue time." "3 planetary cycles minimum." She began organizing survival gear with military precision, perhaps longer. James stood unsteadily, his uniform torn and dirty. Unlike Navarra's form-fitting combat suit, which shimmered with adaptive camouflage technology, his clothing was practical but primitive. Yet he moved with purpose, already evaluating their surroundings. "We should secure the perimeter," he suggested, respecting her obvious command experience without challenging it. This crash likely attracted attention. Navarra appreciated his pragmatism. Most humans she'd encountered during diplomatic missions were either intimidated by her species or overly familiar. Lieutenant Harlow seemed different, professional, focused. "Agreed." She handed him a standard-issue blaster. "Can you operate Istari weaponry?" He examined it briefly, finding the trigger mechanism. "Similar enough to our pulse rifles. I'll manage." They emerged from the wreckage into a humid landscape of towering magenta vegetation. The twin suns cast multiple shadows across the clearing their ship had carved through the jungle. Strange calls echoed from the undergrowth, and something large moved in the distance. "Beautiful," James murmured, surveying the alien landscape. Navarra glanced at him, surprised by his assessment. Most would see only danger in the unknown. "Beauty often conceals danger, Lieutenant." He smiled then, a small, genuine expression that created unexpected lines around his eyes. True of most worthwhile things in the universe, Commander. Something fluttered in Navarra's chest, an unfamiliar sensation she quickly suppressed. On Istra, such undisciplined feelings were considered weaknesses, especially for a warrior of her status. Her people valued control above all else. We should establish a defensive position, she said, scanning the perimeter. Night will fall soon and predators will be drawn to the crash. James nodded, already gathering branches to create a barrier. They worked in efficient silence, each respecting the other's space while completing their tasks. As the alien dusk approached, painting the sky in brilliant purples and oranges, Navarra found herself watching the human's movements, his adaptability, his resourcefulness despite his injuries. Perhaps they would survive this ordeal after all. But as the first of the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Navarra couldn't shake the unsettling thought that the greater danger might not be the hostile planet surrounding them, but the unfamiliar warmth spreading through her whenever the human's eyes met hers. 4 days had passed since the crash, and Navarra found herself struggling with more than just survival. The jungle planet's oppressive humidity made her silver hair cling to her neck as she expertly skinned a reptilian creature she'd hunted at dawn. Behind her, James worked to reinforce their shelter against the afternoon downpours that had become predictable in their ferocity. The meat should last us 2 days if we smoke it properly, she said, her voice deliberately neutral. James hammered a salvaged metal panel into place, muscles flexing beneath his torn uniform shirt. I've been thinking about extending the range of the emergency beacon, if I can boost the signal using parts from the navigation system. It's already transmitting at maximum capacity, Navarra interrupted. Any modification risks complete failure. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. Sometimes calculated risks are necessary. My people don't believe in unnecessary risks, she replied stiffly. James set down his makeshift tools and approached, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Navarra had noticed this, how he always seemed aware of her personal space, never presuming familiarity. Tell me about them, he said, settling on a fallen log. The Istari. We've had limited diplomatic contact and most of what I know comes from military briefings. Navarra hesitated. Sharing cultural information wasn't prohibited, but personal conversation felt dangerous somehow. Still, keeping him engaged could maintain morale, a tactical consideration. We evolved under twin suns on a world with high radiation levels, she explained, continuing her methodical butchering. Our skin developed pigmentation to protect us, and our society developed discipline to survive. We value order, strength, and control. And emotions, James asked quietly. Her hand stilled. Emotions are, private, considered vulnerabilities in most contexts, especially for warriors. But you feel them. It wasn't a question. Navarra resumed her work, slicing with unnecessary force. Of course, we simply choose mastery over indulgence. That's not so different from human military training, James observed, though we tend to compartmentalize rather than suppress. Before Navarra could respond, a thunderous crashing sound came from the jungle beyond their camp. Both soldiers reacted instantly, James grabbing the blaster while Navarra unsheathed her vibro blade, a sleek weapon that hummed with energy. Movement northwest quadrant, she whispered, her glowing blue eyes intensifying as her pupils dilated to enhance her vision. Through the magenta foliage emerged a massive creature, six-legged and armored, with multiple sensing organs clustered around what appeared to be a mouth filled with grinding plates. It paused, testing the air, then charged directly toward them. Split, James called, diving right while Navarra rolled left. The creature's bulk smashed through their outer defenses, its attention fixing on James. Navarra watched in horrified fascination as the human fired 3 precise shots at the beast's sensory cluster, temporarily confusing it. Instead of retreating, James called out, "Navarra, the underside, there's a gap in the plating." She understood immediately, noting the vulnerability he'd spotted. With preternatural speed, she sprinted forward, sliding beneath the creature as it reared up. Her vibro blade found the soft tissue, slicing deep. Acidic fluid sprayed across her arm, burning through her protective suit to the skin beneath. The creature bucked in agony. Navarra twisted, preparing to roll clear when one massive limb crashed down toward her. She braced for impact, but instead felt herself yanked forcefully away as James pulled her to safety, shielding her body with his own as they tumbled down a short embankment. They landed hard, James beneath her, his arms still wrapped protectively around her waist. The creature thrashed above them before retreating into the jungle, leaving destruction in its wake. For a moment, neither moved. Navarra was acutely aware of their position, her body pressed against his, their faces inches apart. His eyes held no fear, only concern for her. "You're hurt," he said softly, gently touching her burned arm. Navarra pulled away, standing quickly. "It's superficial." The pain was significant, but admitting weakness wasn't in her nature. James rose more slowly, wincing from what was likely a bruised rib. "Let me help, we have medical supplies." "I don't need." "Please," he interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "Battlefield medicine is part of my training." After a tense moment, Navarra nodded once. Back at their damaged shelter, James worked silently, cleaning her burned skin with antiseptic from their emergency kit. His touch was gentle but efficient, professional, like everything else about him. "Why did you risk yourself?" she asked finally. "You could have retreated to safety." James applied a healing gel to her arm before answering. "Same reason you didn't hesitate to attack with your blade. It's what soldiers do. On Istra, we fight our own battles." He looked up, his expression serious. "On Earth, we watch each other's backs. It's not about questioning capability, it's about valuing lives." "Even alien lives," the question escaped before she could stop it. James finished bandaging her arm, his fingers lingering just a moment too long. "Especially the lives of those fighting beside us, regardless of where they come from." That night, as the twin moons cast silver light through the repaired shelter, Navarra found sleep elusive. The burn on her arm throbbed, but it wasn't pain keeping her awake. It was the memory of James's body shielding hers, the unfamiliar feeling of being protected rather than being the protector. On the other side of their shelter, James's breathing had settled into the rhythm of sleep. Navarra studied his profile in the moonlight, noting the strength in his features even in repose. He was unlike the males of her world, who viewed warrior females with calculated respect and careful distance. She turned away, forcing her eyes closed. 3 more days until potential rescue. 3 more days to maintain the disciplined distance that had defined her entire life. 3 more days to ignore the unsettling warmth that spread through her chest whenever James looked at her not as an alien warrior, but simply as Navarra. As she finally drifted toward sleep, a treacherous thought surfaced from the depths of her mind. Perhaps 3 days wasn't enough time after all. The ancient structure loomed before them, half buried in vines and earth. Its smooth, iridescent surface reflected the morning light in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, mathematical in their precision. Navarra touched the wall cautiously, feeling a subtle vibration beneath her fingertips. "It's some kind of signal amplifier," James said, examining markings that spiraled across the doorway. "These symbols match fragments we've found in other systems, precursor technology." 8 days had passed since the crash. 8 days of hunting together, building together, surviving together. 8 days of Navarra noticing things about James she shouldn't. The way sunlight caught his dark hair, how his voice softened when he spoke of his home planet, the respect in his eyes when she demonstrated her combat skills. If it's still operational, we could use it to boost our beacon, she acknowledged, pushing those thoughts aside. The energy signature is unlike anything in Istari records. James glanced at her, a smile playing at his lips. Admitting there are things your people haven't catalogued, Commander. The universe is vast, she replied, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. Even the Istari don't claim to know everything. His smile widened at her almost joke. These small exchanges had become more frequent between them, moments of lightness breaking through her disciplined exterior. They entered the structure cautiously, weapons ready. Inside, the air was cool and still, illuminated by bioluminescent growths that had adapted to the ancient technology. A central chamber housed what appeared to be a control console, covered in the same spiral patterns as the entrance. Remarkable preservation, James murmured, brushing away centuries of dust. The power source must be self-regenerating. Nivara watched him work, appreciating his methodical approach. Your expertise with technology is impressive for a human. Before I was a soldier, I was an engineer, he explained, examining connections beneath the console. Figured out I was better at protecting technology than creating it, still come in handy sometimes. You chose to become a warrior. This concept seemed foreign to Nivara. On Istra, our paths are determined by aptitude testing in childhood. I showed combat potential at age 4. James looked up, something like sadness crossing his features. You never had a choice. Choice is inefficient, she said automatically, repeating what she'd been taught. But the words felt hollow now, here in this ancient place with this man who challenged everything she thought she knew. For hours they worked together, James adapting their emergency beacon to the alien technology, while Nivara translated symbols based on linguistic patterns similar to those in Istari archives. As the first sun began to set, the console hummed to life, projecting a holographic display of the surrounding star system. We did it, James breathed, his face illuminated by the blue-green light. This should increase our signal range tenfold. Nivara felt something unfamiliar, pride not in her own accomplishment but in their shared success. The rescue teams will find us now. They will, he agreed, but something in his tone made her look at him more closely. There was happiness there, yes, but also a shadow, regret. You don't sound entirely pleased, she observed. James adjusted the final connections before answering. Of course I want rescue, it's just. He hesitated, then met her eyes directly. These days here with you have been educational. Educational, she repeated, the word feeling insufficient. I've learned more about Istari culture from you than all our diplomatic exchanges combined, he clarified, though something in his expression suggested he meant more than his words conveyed. Nivara turned to the holographic display, watching the representation of stars and planets rotating slowly. When we return, we will resume our separate duties. These lessons will end. They don't have tools. His words hung in the air between them. Nivara felt her pulse quicken, a physiological response she couldn't control. On Istra, such reactions would be grounds for meditation and discipline. Here, with no one to judge but herself, she found she didn't want to suppress it. The diplomatic mission was intended to open communications between our worlds, she said carefully. Perhaps, personal insights could be valuable. James stepped closer, not invading her space but deliberately reducing the distance between them. Is that what this is to you, Nivara? A diplomatic exchange? Her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Few had ever addressed her so directly without her rank or honorific. It should have felt disrespectful. Instead, it felt intimate in a way that both frightened and thrilled her. I don't know what this is, she admitted, the closest she had ever come to confessing uncertainty. The second sun was setting now, casting the chamber in deepening shadows. James reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat, and placed his hand beside hers on the console, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "On Earth we have a saying," he said quietly. "Extraordinary circumstances reveal true character. These past days I've seen who you are beyond duty and discipline, Navarra, and I find that person fascinating." Before she could respond, the console beneath their hands pulsed with energy. The holographic display expanded, revealing something they hadn't noticed before: an approaching vessel, still days away but on an intercept course with their position. "That's not Istari design," Navarra said, studying the configuration. "Not human either," James confirmed, immediately shifting back to soldier mode. "Pirates, scavengers. Unknown, but we should prepare for hostile contact." Navarra was already calculating defense strategies, grateful for the distraction from the moment of vulnerability. As they gathered their equipment to return to camp, a new tension hung between them. Not just the threat of unknown visitors, but the unspoken acknowledgement that something had changed. Something neither military protocol nor Istari discipline had prepared Navarra to confront. That night, as they reinforced their defenses and prepared weapons, Navarra found herself watching James more intently than before. The focused determination in his movements, the intelligence in his tactical suggestions, the respect with which he treated her expertise, all of it combined into something that tugged at her with gravitational force. Under the light of alien moons, with unknown dangers approaching and rescue still uncertain, Navarra faced a truth she could no longer deny. The greatest threat to her disciplined Istari heart wasn't the crashed ship or hostile forces. It was the human who looked at her and saw not just a warrior, but a woman with choices she had never been allowed to make. The 13th day dawned with both urgency and a strange melancholy. Navarra emerged from the shelter to find James already awake, monitoring the amplified emergency beacon while cleaning his blaster. Their preparations for the approaching vessel, whether friend or foe, had been thorough, with defensive positions established and escape routes planned. "The signal strength is holding," he reported as she approached, "and still no response from either of our people." Navarra nodded, her silver hair gleaming in the early light. She had braided it for practicality, though she'd noticed how James's gaze sometimes lingered on it when he thought she wasn't aware. "The unknown vessel will arrive within 2 planetary cycles," she said, checking her own weapons. "We should scout higher ground for better visibility." James holstered his blaster. "There's a ridge to the east that should provide an excellent vantage point." They moved through the jungle with the synchronicity of soldiers who had fought together for years rather than days. Navarra found herself adjusting her pace to match his, while he anticipated her movements with uncanny precision. When they reached the ridge, the view momentarily stole their focus from tactical concerns. The landscape stretched before them in breathtaking alien beauty, forests of magenta and indigo, crystalline lakes reflecting the twin suns, and in the far distance, a mountain range that seemed to shimmer like Navarra's own skin in certain light. "It's beautiful," James said softly. "In another context, this would be considered a paradise rather than a survival situation." Navarra surveyed the terrain, identifying defensive positions automatically, but allowing herself a moment to appreciate the view. "My people rarely travel for pleasure. Duty always comes first." "No vacations, no exploration for its own sake?" James asked, setting up a small scanner to monitor for approaching craft. "Such indulgences are considered frivolous." "Happiness isn't frivolous, Navarra." She turned to him, studying his expression. "You say my name often." A slight flush colored his cheeks. "Should I not? I can return to Commander if you prefer." No, she said quickly, surprising herself. I prefer my name. On Istra, formal address maintains proper distance. Names are reserved for family and, she hesitated. And James prompted gently. Bondmates, she finished, her glowing blue eyes meeting his brown ones directly. The weight of the word hung between them. James completed his scanner setup before responding, his movements deliberate. Do you have one, a bondmate? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. No, my position as elite guardian precludes such attachments. They are considered distractions from duty. James stood facing her fully now. Do you believe that connection is merely a distraction? The question pierced through layers of conditioning and discipline. 13 days ago, Navarra would have answered without hesitation. Now, looking at this human who had fought beside her, protected her, respected her, everything seemed less certain. I believed it, she admitted finally. Now I find myself questioning. The confession felt momentous, a breach in the walls of her training more significant than any combat wound. They spent the day monitoring the skis and planning contingencies. As evening approached, they returned to camp to prepare the night's defenses. The twin suns began their simultaneous descent, painting the sky in spectacular gradients of crimson, gold, and violet. James paused in his work, gazing at the sunset. Navarra found herself watching him instead of the sky, the way the fatting light played across his features, highlighting the strength and gentleness that coexisted there. We should head inside, she said, though there was no immediate threat. Night predators will emerge soon. He turned to her, something unreadable in his expression. A few more minutes, this might be our last sunset here. The implication was clear. Tomorrow would bring either rescue or confrontation. Either way, their time alone on this planet was ending. Against her better judgment, Navarra nodded. They sat side by side on a fallen log outside their shelter, watching as the twin suns dipped below the horizon in perfect synchronization. The changing light made her emerald skin shimmer with iridescent highlights. You know, James said softly, the first moment I saw you in the diplomatic chamber on the station, I couldn't look away. Not because you were alien, but because you were magnificent, like something from a dream. Navarra's pulse quickened. Such thoughts are inappropriate between representatives of our worlds. We're not just representatives anymore, are we? He turned to face her. Out here, we're just Navarra and James. No ranks, no protocols, just two people who have survived together. James, his name felt intimate on her tongue. I've respected your boundaries, he continued, his voice low and earnest. I've honored your culture's restrictions, but before whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that I see you, Navarra. Not as an starry warrior or an alien diplomat, but as the most extraordinary woman I've ever encountered. The sincerity in his eyes undid her. No one had ever looked at her this way, with admiration that had nothing to do with her combat prowess or strategic mind. He saw beyond the soldier to the woman beneath, a woman with desires and doubts she'd never been permitted to acknowledge. My people, she began, but found herself unable to continue the practiced response. Are not here, he finished gently. It's just us right now beneath these stars. As the final sliver of the second sun disappeared, leaving them in the soft glow of twilight, Navarra felt something shift inside her. A wall crumbling, a dam breaking. Years of discipline couldn't prevent the tremor in her hand as she slowly, deliberately reached across the space between them. Her fingers touched his cheek, her emerald skin stark against his tan complexion. James remained perfectly still, allowing her to explore this forbidden contact at her own pace. His skin was warm, slightly rough with stubble, achingly real beneath her fingertips. On Istra, she whispered, this would be considered a grave breach of protocol. James turned his face slightly, his lips brushing against her palm in a gesture so tender it sent a shiver through her entire body. What does Navarra consider it? Necessary, she breathed, and closed the distance between them. Their lips met hesitantly at first, then with growing certainty. Navarra had never been kissed. Such intimacy was rare on Istra, reserved for private ceremonies between bondmates. She had no reference for the sensations flooding through her, the softness of his lips, the strength of his arms as they encircled her, the way her entire body seemed to ignite from within. When they finally parted, both breathing unevenly, James rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since you splinted my arm after the crash. A laugh escaped her, genuine, unrestrained, another first. I thought you were delirious from pain. Just from proximity to you, he murmured, tracing the luminescent markings along her cheekbone with gentle fingers. The night deepened around them, but neither moved to enter the shelter. Beneath an alien sky, Navarra allowed herself to explore sensations long denied. The press of her body against his, the thrill of his hands in her silver hair, the exquisite vulnerability of being desired not for her strength but for herself. Hours later, wrapped in James's arms beneath a blanket of stars, Navarra faced the truth she could no longer deny. Tomorrow might bring rescue and separation, returning her to a world where such feelings were considered weakness. Yet something fundamental had changed, she had changed. Whatever duty demanded tomorrow, tonight she had discovered parts of herself no Istari training could reclaim. What happens now? She whispered against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, so different from the double rhythm of her own. James's arms tightened around her. Now we face tomorrow together. After that, he kissed her forehead. After that, we find a way, across stars, across cultures, we find a way. For the first time in her disciplined life, Navarra allowed herself to hope for something beyond duty, something that belonged only to her. The approaching vessel emerged from the clouds like a predator, sleek, dark, and unmistakably armed. Navarra and James watched from their concealed position as it circled the crash site, scanning for life signs. Not pirates, Navarra murmured, studying its configuration through enhanced binoculars. Military design, Valoran. James tensed beside her. Valorans, your people's adversaries. A fragile truce exists, she explained, her tactical mind already calculating options. But finding an Istari and human together would be valuable intelligence. Their eyes met, both understanding the implications. The diplomatic mission they'd been part of was attempting to forge an alliance between humans and Istari, an alliance the Valorans opposed. Two survivors from both species would be prized captives. The amplified beacon, James realized. It didn't just reach our people. Navarra nodded grimly. We need to move now. They retreated through the underbrush as the Valoran ship landed near their camp. 17 days of survival had made them intimately familiar with the terrain, giving them an advantage over the newcomers. They made their way to the ancient structure, where the signal amplifier continued its broadcast. Inside the cool interior, James quickly adjusted the console. I can modify the signal pattern, make it appear that we've moved to another location. Navarra secured the entrance, her warrior instincts fully engaged despite the emotions churning beneath. Last night's revelations felt almost dreamlike now in the face of immediate danger. We have another problem, she said, checking her scanner. There's a second signal approaching from the opposite vector. James looked up from the console. Valoran reinforcements. No, Navarra's expression shifted subtly. Istari's signature, my people have found us as well. The air between them thickened with unspoken realization. Rescue meant separation. Return to their worlds meant return to protocols, duties, and the immense distance between their species. How long, James asked, his voice carefully controlled. The Istari vessel will arrive within 3 hours. The Valorans are already here. Navarra's glowing eyes met his. We have a tactical decision to make. James abandoned the console and moved to her side. This isn't just tactical, Navarra, you know that. She did. The discipline that had defined her existence now warred with feelings she discovered in his arms. The mission, the alliance, is priority. We must report to our respective commands. And us? He touched her face gently, emerald skin warming beneath his fingers. Was last night just a moment of weakness before returning to duty? And it wasn't weakness, she whispered fiercely. It was the first truly strong thing I've ever done. A crash from outside interrupted them. Valoran scouts had tracked them to the ancient structure. James pulled his blaster while Navarra unsheathed her vibro blade, the familiar stance of warriors preparing for battle. We'll discuss our future after we secure our present, James said with grim determination. What followed was a dance they'd perfected during their time together, moving in perfect synchronization, covering each other's vulnerabilities, communicating with glances and subtle gestures. The Valoran scouts were skilled, but they couldn't match the seamless partnership forged between Navarra and James over 17 days of survival. When the skirmish ended with the scouts retreating to their vessel, Navarra and James knew they had limited time before reinforcements arrived. The Istari ship would reach them first, but only if they could evade the Valorans until then. We need to split up, Navarra said, the words painful even as she recognized their tactical necessity. Divide their forces. James shook his head. Not a chance we stay together. Oh, James. No, his voice was firm. We've survived this long because we protected each other. I'm not abandoning you now. The determination in his eyes matched her own. Navarra realized with startling clarity that this human understood her better than anyone on her homeworld ever had. He respected her strength while refusing to let her face danger alone. They moved through the jungle toward a rendezvous point they'd established for emergencies, a defensible cave system near a waterfall. As they traveled, the twin suns reached their zenith, bathing the alien landscape in golden light that filtered through the canopy above. When we reach our people, James said as they paused to check for pursuers, what will you tell them about us? Navarra had been asking herself the same question. The truth would be complicated. Istari do not approve of cross-species bonds, especially for elite guardians. And if I told you I'm not willing to pretend the past 17 days didn't happen, his eyes held hers, unwavering, that I'm not willing to lose you to light years and protocol. Before she could answer, her scanner beeped. The Istari vessel had accelerated and would reach them within the hour. Simultaneously, Valoran heat signatures were converging on their position. We're out of time, she said, tucking the scanner away. The cave is our best option. They reached the waterfall as distant energy weapons discharged behind them. Inside the cave, they quickly established defensive positions, using techniques they'd perfected during their time together. As James set up proximity sensors, Navarra found herself watching him, memorizing the determined set of his jaw, the precise efficiency of his movements. We'll hold until my people arrive, she said, checking her weapons. Then you'll be safe. James looked up, and you, what happens to you when you return to Istra? The question hung between them as energy blasts struck the rocks outside, announcing the Valorans' arrival. Duty happens, she replied, though the word tasted bitter now. For the next 30 minutes, they defended their position against waves of Valoran soldiers. Fighting back-to-back, they repelled each assault with the coordinated precision that had become second nature. When Navarra was grazed by an energy blast, James applied a healing patch without comment, his touch lingering just a moment longer than necessary. When the Istari vessel finally appeared overhead, its defensive systems driving back the Valoran forces, Navarra felt an unexpected reluctance. Rescue had been their goal for 17 days, yet now that it had arrived, she found herself wishing for more time. The ship's transport beam enveloped them, dissolving the cave around them as they materialized in a sterile white chamber. Immediately, Istari guards surrounded them, weapons raised cautiously at James. "Stand down," Navarra commanded, her voice resuming the authoritative tone of an elite guardian. "This human is an ally." A tall Istari male stepped forward, Commander Thalas, her superior officer. "Guardian Navarra, your survival is most fortunate. The diplomatic mission feared both delegations lost." "We were the only survivors," she reported, aware of James standing silently beside her, a respectful distance now between them. Lieutenant Harlow's assistance was invaluable. Thalas studied the human with clinical interest. "Indeed, the alliance negotiations continue, though your disappearance caused significant delay. Both species will be eager for your debriefing." "The Valorans were searching specifically for us," James added, his voice professional. "They knew about the alliance talks." "Troubling," Thalas acknowledged. "You will both be fully debriefed once we rendezvous with the human vessel awaiting our arrival. Guardian Navarra, report to medical for assessment. The human will be escorted to temporary quarters." As Istari officers moved to separate them, Navarra felt panic rise in her throat, an emotion so foreign to her disciplined mind that it momentarily paralyzed her. James's eyes found hers, filled with everything they couldn't say in this sterile room surrounded by her people. "Commander," she said suddenly, her voice carrying the authority that no Istari would question, "I will escort Lieutenant Harlow personally. Our shared experience provides important context for his safety protocols." Thalas raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Very well, report to medical afterward." As they walked through the gleaming corridors of the Istari vessel, the familiar environment felt strangely alien to Navarra. Or perhaps she was the one who had changed, no longer fitting perfectly into the ordered world of her people. When they reached the quarters assigned to James, she hesitated at the threshold. Around them, the ship hummed with efficiency, every Istari performing their designated function with precision. Everything was as it should be, except for the storm raging within her. "This is where duty leads," she said softly, aware of surveillance throughout the ship. James stepped closer, not touching her but near enough that she could feel his warmth. "Duty isn't everything, Navarra, you taught me that." "I taught you," her blue eyes widened slightly. "By questioning, by allowing yourself to feel." His voice dropped to a whisper. "By choosing, for one night, to be more than what you were programmed to be." The door slid closed behind them, offering momentary privacy. James touched her face gently, and Navarra allowed herself to lean into his palm, a gesture that would shock any Istari who witnessed it. "They'll separate us at the rendezvous," he said. "Return me to Earth, take you back to Istra, pretend nothing changed." "Nothing can change," she whispered, even as her body betrayed her by moving closer to his. "My world, my duty." "Ask me to stay," James interrupted, his eyes intense. "Or tell me you'll come with me. There are options, Navarra, diplomatic postings, cultural exchange programs, ways we could." "It's forbidden." But even as she spoke, something was breaking free inside her, the walls of discipline cracking under the pressure of newfound emotion. "Some things are worth breaking rules for." James smiled, that same warm smile that had first begun to thaw her resolve beneath alien suns. "Some connections transcend protocol." Navarra made her decision in that moment, not with the calculated precision of an elite guardian, but with the certainty of a woman who had discovered parts of herself long buried beneath duty and discipline. "I will request reassignment," she said, the words sending a thrill of both terror and liberation through her. "As cultural liaison to Earth, it is logical given our shared experience and the alliance negotiations." Joy bloomed across James's features. They might refuse. "Then I will find another way." She straightened, determination hardening her resolve. You taught me that there are choices beyond those we are given. He pulled her close then, propriety forgotten as his lips found hers. For the first time on an Istari vessel, Navara allowed herself to embrace not just a human, but a future she would choose rather than accept. 3 months later, as Earth came into view from the diplomatic vessel's observation deck, Navara stood in her new uniform, the insignia of cultural ambassador gleaming beside her elite guardian rank. The reassignment had been approved, though not without resistance from the Istari High Command. Her argument that first-hand experience with humans made her uniquely qualified had eventually prevailed. James waited on the planet below, having returned ahead of her to prepare for her arrival and secure his own new position in the Alliance security detail. The distance had been painful, but their communications had sustained her through the diplomatic negotiations and cultural briefings. As the blue-green world grew larger in the viewport, Navara touched the small pendant hidden beneath her uniform, a fragment of crystal from the ancient structure on the planet where everything had changed. James wore its twin. Ambassador and aide approached respectfully. Landing procedures commence in 10 minutes. Nivara nodded, her silver hair now worn in a style of her choosing rather than the severe military arrangement of her past. Thank you. When the aide departed, she allowed herself a small smile, no longer a breach of discipline but an expression of the woman she had chosen to become. Beneath distant stars, stranded on an alien world, she had discovered emotions she'd been taught to suppress her entire life. Now she carried them with her, not as weaknesses but as strengths, a new kind of power that complemented rather than undermined her warrior's discipline. The ship began its descent toward Earth where James waited. Toward a future neither of them could fully predict, except for one certainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, a human and an Istari who had found something rare and precious in each other's differences. Nivara whispered a phrase James had taught her during those nights beneath twin suns, words from his world that now belonged to both of them, coming home. And for the first time in her life, she truly was.